Hey, yo, what's the deal? I miss your boy Tag from Pro Wrestling Tag, you know what I mean? Damn, what the fuck? As of this recording, it is 5:08 p.m., August 19, 2026. But the upload time to this is actually Thursday, August 20th, 11:30 a.m. You know what I mean? This is the first video of the day. Like I said, I'm doing something brand new. You know what I mean? I'm going to make videos that, ahead of time. You know what I mean? Because I feel like it gives me a head start into actually making videos for the next day. And, because when I do these videos, I always try to make room for myself in terms of how much room I can have, how much breathing room I can fucking have. You know what I'm saying? When I do these vids and shit. You know what I mean? I don't want to burn myself out. You know what I mean? I don't want to do none of that. So that's why I think. And plus, when I'm bored, like I really don't have nothing to do, I was going to go outside, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just relax here for the day because I have to take care of something on the internet. So I figure, fuck it. Tomorrow I'll definitely be out and about. You know what I'm saying? And such. So, also at this recording, you guys know me. I will not watch Dynamite. Fuck that shit. I will not watch that bullshit. I am not watching no AEW Dynamite. Get the fuck out of here. But I do want to talk about something that someone actually said on Twitter about ECW during this infancy. And you know what? Growing up, right? Now when I think about it, you know what? It actually made a lot of fucking sense. It really made a lot of sense in terms of, when you now take a step back, how ECW was not as, it was popular, but it wasn't like, how can I say this? It was not in a worldwide mainstream like how it was in the 90s. So there was a guy on social media who goes by the name of Society Reviews, right? And he responded to an image of a girl who, this is from a Twitter page called 90s WWE, right? Which I'm subscribed to. And in the photo, it shows a lady who is surrounded by 3 plates, right? And it look like they're all pancakes, but each of those pancakes have a logo on it, right? There's 3 people holding 3 different kind of pancakes, right? One holding ECW, one holding WCW, and the other one holding the WWF. And on the caption, it said "Me in the '90s," right? And then the image, but the caption in the post said "We were eating good." So there's a guy, like I said, he goes by Society Reviews. He said this. ECW was not as popular in the 1990s as the revisionists want you to think. And when you really think back, right, it's actually fucking true. It's actually fucking true. The only reason why ECW was popping in the first place was because at that time, right, they were the only pro wrestling company that created the illusion of being real, right? Being real in terms of how how people work. It brought they really blurred the lines of a work shoot, of work shoots and such. They were cursing. They were bringing adult themes into pro wrestling. They were doing things, and mind, they did stuff with grunge music and hip hop and shit like that. So they actually brought something from the locker room, right, that was never exposed on TV. But, ECW was the first promotion to actually go towards that direction, on a national basis. And the other thing, too, how ECW was popular, I think there was a 2020... It was a 2020 documentary. If I can find that documentary, I'll put it in the description. It was a 2020 documentary about professional wrestling. And ECW just happened to, I think it was either 2020 or Dateline. And ECW just happened to be featured in that. It's not a documentary. It was a piece. It was a piece. You know, they just happened to be featured in that piece. You know what I'm saying? So with the piece, and then video stores carrying ECW, and then with the help of the WWF, right? That's what ECW was. I would say, okay, in today's landscape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare today's landscape with how it was in the 90s, okay? So bear with me. You have the WWE. AEW was basically what WCW was. It's nowhere near WCW level, but in the 90s, it was WCW level, but a little higher than AEW, just a little higher. And TNA is basically ECW. That's what the fuck it was back in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? ECW always played they always played the redheaded stepchild. They always played second fiddle. You know what I'm saying? And let's keep it a stack. If it was not for the relationship with the World Wrestling Federation, right? I don't think they would have survived. I do not think ECW would have survived. You know, Vince was funding ECW. He helped Paul Heyman fund ECW. That's how he was able to get, pay-per-views up and running. You know what I mean? Better lighting and all this other shit, right? I mean, I wish he could have paid the people, but no. But the problem was with ECW, they didn't run big arenas. You know what I mean? They wrestled in auditoriums and fucking Division III high school, Division III college gyms and shit. Now, I mean, that's like ECW doing a fucking a pay-per-view at the at that small little arena. It's not even an arena. Yeah, it is an arena. That is 2 blocks down from Fort Greene Park. You guys know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? I don't know. I forgot the name of it. You know what I mean? But it's right fucking there. It's actually across the street from the hospital. Right there on fucking decal. You know what I mean? Like when you walk up, there you see Fort Greene Park, right? That's like ECW doing a pay-per-view there, right? ECW, the only time ECW ran a big arena show that I could think of in the United States was Heatwave 98. That's the only time, right there. And that was in, I think it was Daytona, Ohio at the Harris Center. That was the only time, and that's when WCW held their shit at. That was the only time that ECW ran big arena shows. You know what I'm saying? So they was nowhere near as popular as the WWF. I mean, they had popularity. Don't get it twisted. And yes, they were also featured in what was it? It was a fucking show with Chuck Norris. They used to give it on, I think, TNN, if I'm not mistaken. I think TNN. And yes, that also did help them somewhat, too. You know, that like getting a national TV deal did help them somewhat. You know what I mean? But Paul Heyman refused to improve on the show's aesthetics and everything by staying in small arenas and shit. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, they had a video game out. You know what I'm saying? They also had, if I'm not mistaken, I think they had an album. And yes, they also had action figures. Yes. So, like I said, they were popular, right? But they were like right there. There was just a wrestling promotion who was basically I don't want to be disrespectful, but it was time filler wrestling, right? Compared to the World Wrestling Federation, WCW, right? You know, they weren't competing on Monday nights, nor they were competing on Wednesday and Thursday nights. You know what I'm saying? So it was, like I said, it was right there. It was right there. So that post, I actually agree. And yes, they had 2 video games. Great, right? Doesn't that remind you of another promotion? TNA. TN fucking A. The exact same shit. The exact same shit. Right? And look what happened to TNA. Right? TNA is nowhere near as popular as it once was. You know what I'm saying? they are on the verge of being brought out by TKO at some point. But yeah, like I said, ECW was not as popular as, you know, as the World Wrestling Federation or WCW. Shit. In order for you to catch fucking ECW shows, you got to stay up at 1 in the morning, 1 in the morning, especially here in New York. You know what I mean? Where ECW was being shown on Friday nights at 1 a.m. on MSG, and then, you know, at 12 a.m. at, you know, on Channel 31, which used to be called PAX. You know what I'm saying? So, that post made a lot of fucking sense. It made a lot of sense because of when you really think about it, right? When you and listen, okay? Both big companies were taking stuff from ECW. We know that. But if you really think about it, in the grand scheme of things, right? ECW put Paul Heyman was the one who put himself in that space where, you know, ECW was only going to be in small arenas, and, you know, he wasn't going to refuse to grow with his product. And if he did try to grow with his product, think about this. If he tried to grow with his product, right, a lot of stuff would have to be changed. A lot. The cursing, the rated R content. It would have been like he would have had to really scale back on a lot of shit that made ECW popping. A lot. And I don't think he was ready to I personally do not think he was ready to do that. I don't think he was ready to take that step. Because, you know, he wanted to separate ECW from both the WWF and WCW, right? And listen, he had all these things, right? But it still hurt the promotion at the end. So I would say ECW was more of a trend than anything else in the 90s. It was more of a fucking trend. You know what I'm saying? Like everything was trendy at ECW, but it wasn't. But you knew ECW was nowhere going to be in that same space as the World Wrestling Federation nor World Championship Wrestling, and you seen it. You know what I mean? And then, of course, you guys know what happened in March 2001 in pro wrestling. You know what I mean? By the end of it, and I have nothing else to say. So anyway, guys, I'm about to be out. You know what I mean? I will be making some more vids today. You know what I mean? Well, tomorrow, but, you know, it's actually today as this is recording. So I'm going to holler at you motherfuckers. Peace.